The silence was not planned. It arrived unexpectedly, heavy and deliberate, pressing against the high ceilings of the European Council chamber like a weather system that no one had forecasted. The summit was designed to be procedural. Migration frameworks, fiscal flexibility debates, strategic autonomy funding, another long session of calibrated statements and diplomatic phrasing. The choreography of Brussels was familiar. Leaders spoke, the Commission summarized, compromise language emerged. But beneath the routine structure, tension had been building for months. Italy was under pressure. Mediterranean migration routes had intensified again. Reception centers were overwhelmed. Local governments demanded relief. Domestic voters were watching closely. Across Europe, economic strain lingered. Energy costs had not fully stabilized. Growth forecasts were uneven. Political movements skeptical of centralization were gaining ground in multiple capitals. The institutional architecture of the European Union had grown stronger through crisis. Pandemic response had centralized procurement authority. Joint debt issuance had redefined fiscal coordination. Sanctions coordination had accelerated executive capability. Crisis governance had reshaped power, and Giorgia Meloni had noticed. She entered the chamber without spectacle. No dramatic gestures, no raised voice. She understood that in Brussels, volume is less effective than timing. The agenda moved predictably. France emphasized unity. Germany called for fiscal prudence with flexibility. Smaller member states requested clarity on burden-sharing mechanisms. Then Meloni asked for the floor. Her tone was controlled, her posture steady. She did not accuse. She asked a question. If the European Union defines solidarity as shared sovereignty, she began, at what point does shared sovereignty require shared consequence? The room shifted. This was not rhetorical flourish. It was structural inquiry. Italy had complied with EU migration frameworks. It had coordinated with Frontex. It had absorbed frontline pressure while redistribution negotiations stalled. Mechanisms existed on paper. Implementation remained uneven. Meloni did not criticize individual leaders. She challenged the premise. If integration centralizes authority, why does accountability remain national when pressure intensifies? The question pierced beyond migration. It touched fiscal governance, energy procurement, budget flexibility. Over recent years, Brussels had expanded executive coordination during crisis. Member states ceded operational space in exchange for stability. But as crises multiplied, some capitals felt that authority pulled upward faster than burden pulled outward. Von der Leyen responded with institutional clarity. Solidarity mechanisms exist. Redistribution frameworks require political consensus. Enforcement requires alignment among member states. Her argument was procedurally correct. But Meloni's question lingered. If alignment fails repeatedly, does solidarity remain conceptual rather than functional? The chamber grew quiet not because of drama, but because of recognition. Frontline states, Italy, Greece, Spain, understood the pressure. Inland states faced different domestic constraints. Electoral dynamics complicated redistribution commitments. Meloni pressed further, still measured. If Brussels can centralize fiscal oversight within weeks during economic emergency, why does migration burden sharing remain negotiable year after year? The comparison was strategic. Fiscal rules had tightened rapidly during debt crises. Recovery funds mobilized quickly during pandemic shock. Yet migration redistribution progressed incrementally, often delayed by domestic politics in receiving states. The contrast illuminated asymmetry. Von der Leyen emphasized treaty limitations. Migration touches national sovereignty deeply. Consensus building requires patience. But patience feels different on the front line. The debate shifted from policy specifics to philosophical architecture. Is the European Union a centralized crisis machine or a negotiated coalition of sovereign states? Meloni reframed again. If Brussels claims authority to ensure compliance in fiscal discipline, can it also ensure compliance in solidarity? The question forced recalibration. Authority without enforcement in one domain becomes symbolic. Enforcement without solidarity in another domain becomes imbalanced. Other leaders began recalculating their positions. Some sympathized privately, others feared precedent. If migration enforcement accelerated centrally, future crises might see similar consolidation. Germany expressed cautious support for enhanced coordination, but warned against undermining national parliamentary consent. France emphasized strategic autonomy, but remained guarded about internal redistribution mechanisms. The tension was not theatrical, it was architectural. Meloni had not attacked von der Leyen personally. She had challenged the equilibrium between pooled power and pooled responsibility. The summit extended late into the evening. Policy teams drafted compromise language. Proposals emerged for accelerated solidarity mechanisms, triggered automatically when frontline states exceed threshold capacity. Financial incentives were restructured. Redistribution quotas were recalibrated. Behind closed doors, advisors acknowledged that Meloni's framing had altered the narrative. The debate was no longer about numbers. It was about symmetry. Symmetry legitimizes integration. As negotiations continued over subsequent weeks, Brussels introduced refined automatic solidarity triggers. Enforcement mechanisms gained clarity. Redistribution obligations incorporated binding timelines rather than voluntary pledges. No leader was destroyed, no institution collapsed, but the architecture shifted subtly. Meloni's question exposed tension between executive centralization and uneven burden sharing. And exposure creates momentum. European media framed the summit as confrontation. Analysts described it as recalibration of balance within the Union. The deeper story was not victory or defeat. It was leverage applied through inquiry. In political systems, the most powerful weapon is not accusation. It is a question that cannot be ignored. The months following the summit saw tangible shifts. Frontline funding increased. Redistribution enforcement strengthened modestly. Fiscal flexibility discussions integrated migration impact metrics. Von der Leyen adapted strategically. She embraced calibrated solidarity reinforcement while preserving Commission authority. Meloni returned to Rome with enhanced credibility domestically. She had not isolated Italy, she had reshaped conversation. The European Union did not break, it bent. And bending under pressure prevents fracture. Historians would later view the summit as a moment when integration confronted its own asymmetry. Shared sovereignty demands shared consequence. When consequence becomes uneven, legitimacy erodes. Meloni's single question illuminated that imbalance. Light changes structures. The chamber that began in procedural routine ended in recalibrated equilibrium. Not broken, rebalanced. And in institutions as complex as the European Union, rebalance can be more transformative than revolution. The recalibration did not end when the summit closed. It expanded. In the days that followed, Brussels entered a quiet state of institutional introspection. Publicly, statements emphasized unity and constructive dialogue. Privately, advisors began mapping what Meloni's question had exposed. It was not just migration, it was asymmetry. Over the past decade, the European Union had evolved through crisis. Each emergency strengthened the Commission's operational center. The Eurozone debt crisis centralized fiscal surveillance. The pandemic accelerated joint borrowing and procurement. The energy shock compressed regulatory timelines. Executive coordination became more decisive with each wave. Centralization had been justified by urgency, but urgency leaves residue. Meloni had not attacked the legality of that evolution. She had questioned its distribution. If Brussels can demand compliance when deficits exceed thresholds, can it demand compliance when solidarity fails to materialize? The distinction was subtle but powerful. In Rome, domestic reaction was swift. Italian media framed the summit as a moment of institutional awakening. Not a rebellion, but a recalibration. Political analysts highlighted how the question reframed the debate from national grievance to structural symmetry. Across Southern Europe, leaders watched closely. Greece and Spain shared similar frontline pressures. Publicly, they maintained diplomatic restraint. Privately, they evaluated whether solidarity enforcement might finally gain teeth. Germany faced its own dilemma. Berlin supports integration, but remains sensitive to domestic electoral constraints. Automatic redistribution triggers could ignite political backlash, yet rejecting reform risked appearing indifferent to frontline strain. France saw opportunity. Paris has long advocated for strategic autonomy and deeper integration. A more symmetrical solidarity mechanism could strengthen Europe's internal cohesion, reinforcing its geopolitical posture. Inside the Commission, von der Leyen recalibrated strategy. She recognized that the strength of supranational authority depends on perceived fairness. If pooling sovereignty produces uneven consequence, public trust erodes. Policy teams began drafting revised solidarity protocols. These proposals introduced automatic financial support tranches once migration inflow thresholds were exceeded. Redistribution mechanisms incorporated binding deadlines rather than open-ended negotiation cycles. The innovation was procedural but significant. Binding timelines create predictability. Predictability stabilizes trust. Meanwhile, European Parliament factions re-engaged. Sovereignty-leaning members praised the shift toward enforceable solidarity. Integration advocates framed it as maturation of shared governance. The deeper transformation was psychological. For years, many leaders approached Brussels as executor of crisis management. Meloni's question repositioned national leaders as architects of equilibrium. Power dynamics shifted subtly. The Council demanded greater clarity in future Commission proposals regarding burden distribution impact assessments. Fiscal flexibility negotiations began incorporating migration cost metrics explicitly. These adjustments did not dismantle central authority, they refined it. International observers noticed. Washington interpreted the recalibration as strengthening EU cohesion, reducing risk of fragmentation that could complicate transatlantic cooperation. Moscow analyzed whether enhanced solidarity might reinforce external border management. Beijing evaluated whether internal balance could increase Europe's strategic autonomy. Within months, the Commission unveiled a structured solidarity enforcement mechanism. It included graduated response levels triggered automatically by frontline capacity strain indicators. It integrated financial instruments, relocation quotas, and operational deployment resources. The proposal passed with qualified majority support. It was not unanimous, but it marked evolution. Meloni's question had not broken the EU. It had broken complacency. The architecture of integration now incorporated clearer symmetry between authority and consequence. Von der Leyen adapted masterfully. She framed the reform not as concession, but as strengthening of European unity. By embracing recalibration, she preserved institutional credibility while acknowledging imbalance. The episode reshaped leadership perception across Europe. Meloni emerged not as disruptor, but as structural interrogator. Von der Leyen solidified her role as adaptive architect rather than rigid defender. The European Union continued functioning. Markets remained stable. Migration flows persisted, but response mechanisms improved incrementally. The true impact was long-term. Future crises would now encounter a union more attentive to symmetry. When fiscal rules tightened, solidarity triggers would be examined in parallel. When executive authority expanded, distribution of consequence would be scrutinized. Integration deepened through friction. Friction is not fracture, it is adjustment under pressure. Years later, scholars would describe the summit as inflection rather than explosion. The moment when a single question illuminated asymmetry and forced refinement. No destruction, no collapse, but equilibrium restored. The European Union survives not because tension is absent, but because tension generates evolution. Meloni's question did not shatter institutions. It compelled them to reflect. And in supranational governance, reflection can be revolutionary. The chamber that day had felt heavy with silence, not because it was broken, but because it was listening. Listening to a question that redefined balance. And balance, once redefined, reshapes power quietly but permanently.